SQL Azure databases need to be secured pretty much in the same fashion as local databases do. Regardless of whether it's hosted internally or within the cloud, you need to make sure that only the appropriate users are accessing the database and from the appropriate systems as well. So SQL Azure provides you with security mechanisms to do just that. So let's have a look at some of the options that can be configured when you are configuring security for SQL Azure. For starters, it does not support Windows-based login authentication mode. Windows Azure simply does not have Active Directory as part of its structure. So all of the user accounts that you're going to create for any given database within SQL all must use the SQL login authentication mode only. So it doesn't matter regardless of the size or the number of users that you might want to create, there simply is only an option for SQL login. Despite the fact that they might be using a Microsoft account to gain access just to the Azure portal, there is no Active Directory login authentication mode. So once you have the appropriate user accounts created, there still are some other considerations, most notably firewall configuration that's required for any kind of local application that you might use to access the data. Now, we'll see in a couple of seconds here that there's two options. You don't have to manage it locally, but when you are managing within Azure, this is your first choice. You can go with effectively just Azure-based management. So we have no local management application on the client system here. We are simply logging into the Azure portal only. This gives you access to your database on the database server. So you can simply log into the portal, connect to the database, just simply click on it, and down at the bottom of the screen, there's a little icon that simply says Manage. This launches a Silverlight-based application wherein you can do some fairly standard day-to-day administrative tasks. It's not quite as robust as something like SQL Server Management Studio, but it gives you most abilities to create objects, manage their permissions, and create additional users as well. So with that approach, you literally need only log into the portal. That's it. You can access your management interface from within there. If, however, you prefer a local-based application, you certainly can do that. So from a local application, now we've got something installed on a client system locally, something such as SQL Server Management Studio. But when you're trying to connect from a local system, then we now have firewall considerations that have to be taken into account. For starters, when you want to make the connection from something like SQL Server Management Studio, you need the fully qualified database name. Now, you can access that from within the Azure Management Portal. If you simply click on the server itself, within your portal, it will show you the entire fully qualified name. The server name is usually something that's randomly generated, but you can certainly specify the database name. So you do have to have your server name dot database name, and then the final two components are usually cloudapp.net or something along those lines. Something that, again, is already supplied for you by Windows Azure. So you need the fully qualified name, whatever that's going to be. The port that is being used for all SQL access is still the default port of 1433. Now, you don't have to actually configure that within Azure. This is more so something you need to be aware of to make sure that your own system is not blocking 1433 on the outgoing side of things. So that would be more so here in this area. You want to make sure that it's not being blocked from within your own environment at your point of exit. From that point within the database configuration within Azure, you do have to specify an allowed IP address range, and it gives you that option just within your portal. You don't have to go into the management of the database itself. There's simply an area that you can click on configuration, and it just says, here are the allowed IP addresses. And if you're using your own standard local system, shall we say, to gain access, then it actually picks up on your IP address automatically and by default. And there's simply a button that you can click that says add my local IP address to the allowed ranges. From that point, it's up to you to determine any other systems that you might want to be able to gain access. And you do have to explicitly list their IP or perhaps the whole range. And it, of course, needs to be a public available IP address and not anything private. Once you have all that configured, then you can go ahead and access your database environment from your local application.